Twednesday. If you're out of touch with our Twednesday concept, let me give you a hand. Wait, maybe not. By explaining that we combine Tuesday and Wednesday. Because of the archetypes they represent, Tuesday being named after Mars, which represent wars, and Wednesday, which is named after Mercury, which represents money and language and so on. Concepts we have explained in the past two Wednesdays. To fully grasp it and all of the references, it will be good to watch the previous ones. Since money and war are almost inseparable, let's take a look at cash. If you're new here, I like to use a lot of etymology to get to the point, and because it's fun, you know. So cash, from Proto-Indo-European cap, which means to grasp. And then we take a look at cap, possibly a non-Indo-European loanword. Compared Gab to seize. That is interesting because my name is Gabriella. Nice to meet you. So it means to see. Cap in Proto-Indo-European means to seize and to grab. Are you grasping it? Let's go to kappa. Capiche. So kappa is a Greek letter you might be familiar with. From ancient Greek, kappa, ultimately from Proto-Semitic cap, meaning palm and hand. And kaf, which is the 11th letter of the Semitic abjad. And then the origins, as you might have already assumed, based on the etymology, kaf is thought to be derived from a pictogram of a hand. In both modern Arabic and modern Hebrew, kaf means palm or grip. Now pay attention to the palm hieroglyph. Let's take a look at the dua. You might be familiar with it. And since we bring themes related to the underworld and wars and money, why not talk about avarice, which could possibly be a way to go to the underworld. So let's take a look at avarice, not necessarily avarice. Avarice was the Hyksos capital of Egypt, located at the modern site of Tel al-Daba in the northeast region of the Nile Delta. Now, who were the Hyksos? Material finds at Tel al-Daba indicate that the Hyksos originated in the Levant. The Hyksos' personal names indicated they spoke a Western Semitic language and may be called, for convenience sake, Canaanites. In the 18th century BC, the Hyksos conquered Lower Egypt and set up Avaris as their capital. Kamose, the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty, besieged Avaris but was unable to defeat the Hyksos there. A few decades later, Ahmose first captured Avaris and overran the Hyksos. So here we can actually see some parallels with the biblical story, which says Moses brought his people out of Egypt. And here we have the story of Ahmose, who also brought the Hyksos out of Egypt, but as a different narrative. Let's not go there so much, but I want to highlight what was going on in Avaris. So you can see this image here, which was actually depicting hands that were cut off from people, and they actually found in Avaris, by the way, the severed hands. So supposedly they were tokens presented to a king of ancient Egypt to prove the valor of his soldiers in battle. The hands were carefully removed from the bodies, likely soon after an enemy's death, before being placed in tombs around the throne room of King Kayan, a Hyksos ruler of Egypt's 15th dynasty. And I also like to highlight some patterns. The goal of this is to analyze reality, mostly by looking at the past to try and make sense of the present. And by doing so, we find a lot of parallels and patterns because everything is connected. So I thought very carefully of how I was going to present this, since it's such a delicate subject and not an easy one to handle. The intention is not to add drama to the trauma, but simply to expose such patterns. Since these patterns have been repeated, perhaps in ways they are not entirely related, but considering the interconnectedness of our reality, they might be more closely related than we think. And by deeply understanding such patterns, we can perhaps prevent them from repeating. So from the hints found in avarice in Egypt, you might have already thought of another period in time where something similar happened. So let's go to colonial Belgian Congo. Here we have an image of a slave father gazing at his daughter's severed hand and foot in 1904. So it's not that long ago. So Leopold II was the second king of the Belgians from 1865 to 1909 and the founder and sole owner of the Congo Free State from 1885 to 1908. Leopold fervently believed that overseas colonies were the key to a country's greatness, and he worked tirelessly to acquire colonial territory for Belgium. So, despite never visiting Congo, he was able to acquire Congo as a colony, and that was only possible because he used mercenaries, the force publique, to do so, and that's how things happen. This is the point of Twednesday. We bring themes related to war and money, as they are associated with mythological characters that we have already mentioned, Mars and Mercury, and their role as figures of the underworld. So Leopold extracted a fortune from the Congo, initially by the collection of ivory, and then rubber after an increase in the price of rubber in 1890. So he used forced labor from the people to harvest and process rubber. Lots of atrocities happened. You can read more about it if you're curious. It's no secret, although he did try to and probably did cover a lot of what actually went down. Leopold's sister became the Empress Carlotta of Mexico. His first cousins included both Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and her husband, Prince Albert, and also King Fernando II of Portugal. I don't want to get too deep into psychology here, but it would be interesting to find the foundation for such patterns, how and why they arise. We can associate avarice to need for external validation and a problem related to the ego. I believe ignorance is taught. And there is lots to be said about it, but I don't want to make this too long. We will keep discussing subjects related to the underworld next Wednesday. This was a heavy one, and perhaps we can talk about heaviness next week. But definitely not on a Friday or a Sunday, because if it's heavy, it's not light.